Welcome to part 2 of our conversation with Beesham. Today we're going to tackle even more info on sourdough and wild yeast cultures. Cultures for Health has everything you need to get your own sourdough started going at home. Use the code CFH Podcast to get 25% off. One of the things that I noticed on your website is that you use a lot of heritage grains, and I think you talk a lot about local grains to you in Sweden. Can you talk a little bit about that, how you chose the grains that you choose every day and what that looks like, if you like to mill your own grains, freshness, if that makes a difference to you, what you're really looking for, and maybe advice to people on how they can also find grains local to them, because I don't think people really realize how easy it is to
how easy and
source
important
grains
it is
local
also.
to
It's
them.
very important, actually.
Yeah.
Outside where I live on a farm here, so I have been involved in a project for 3 years ago. It was a big project here in Sweden where it was sponsored by the government itself here. So the project was that to encourage people, many people involved, to get your bread on your table. You start from the farmers, the millers, the bakers, and the consumers also. So we try to bring back with the heritage grains. I use a lot of the heritage grain myself in all my bakings. And I think it's very important, first of all, because it's very important to go back. Those grains like spelt, and we have a special wheat here called Ålands wheat. You have kamut, you have enkorn, you have emmer, there's so many different all grains. There's many of them. Actually, in this project I was involved here, we used to do a lot of tests growing every summer in the farm here with maybe from 400 to 600 different kinds of grains.
Wow.
To test growing them in a small square like this, square foot,
Right.
to see which one will grow, which one will adapt to the weather here, and what harvest, how big the grains will come, So So actually, we have this researcher his name is Hans Larsson. He's the one behind. He's been doing this for 40 years. He worked at a farm university here in the south of Sweden. So I was very happy to be involved in this project and to do. When they will harvest the grains, we will fresh mill it. And then I will bake with it. So what I see, a lot of people today is getting the new mock mill from home milling and all this. Actually, I have been doing it almost for 19 years, milling my own grains, 19 years ago. So because we had a lot of rye here, a lot of rye on the farm. So I would like to mill my own rye to get a nice bread from fresh mill bread. This is also very important. A fresh mill flour will give you a more flavorful nutrition and everything that you need for your bread, instead of going to get a package of flour which been on the supermarket shelf for over 1 year.
Right.
So of course it will make a difference.
Do you think it also makes a difference?
If somebody I see a lot of people is going into whole grains today, so the best is to just mill your own grains.
Yeah, so do you think that milling your own grains also makes a difference in things like hydration? One thing I've noticed is that the fresher the flour sometimes can really affect one way or another the amount of hydration that you need to add to your dough in order to get it to, whatever the desired consistency is for you. Do you find that milling your own grains has different effects on your bread in that way too?
Yeah, it depends what kind of, everything depends on the flour. That's why I said earlier, recipe is just a recipe. I've been traveling the whole world. I have been baking from the very weak flour to the very best flour. When I was in USA, so I was in Maine, and then you have very good flours from the flour I think we used from there was from Maine grains, because I was on the east part in Maine. So you can see that the recipe I had with me, let's say it will take 72% of hydration, but that flour was taking almost 78% of hydration. So that's why
Mhm.
you see it's different. So of course, when you grind your flour, you have fresh mill flour, and it depends what kind of grains it is and how much you're putting of the fresh mill whole grains in your dough to making
Mhm.
your dough. It will absorb more hydration. It will affect your the formula of the recipes. So sometimes it goes over 120% hydration.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've seen
So,
that. That's
so it's very
crazy.
difficult to understand, so everybody
Mhm.
just need to try and do tests. As I said, always want to try a couple of times till we get the right result that we want. So
Right. When you use whole grains and you're milling your own flour, do you kind of have a percentage, like earlier you said inclusions, probably don't go above 40%, 25 maybe is a good minimum. Do you have like a percentage that you use whole heritage grains in your doughs, or do you do 100% in some of your doughs, like 100% like local rye?
yeah,
What's kind of like the rule of thumb there for you?
yeah. There's actually there's no rules. Okay, actually there's no rules. But
Okay.
if you want to call a bread whole grains bread, so it has to be over
Mm-hmm.
50% at
Right.
least. Okay.
Gotcha.
But like for me, when I do a spelt bread, I keep it 100% spelt. Even I would make the
Mm-hmm.
leaven also a spelt leaven. So
Gotcha.
because here we have a lot of different flours. Actually, we have a local mill not far from here, it's like 30 kilometers from where I live. They mill
Mm-hmm.
only heritage grains and fine flour also for bakeries, to give to bakeries, to small artisan bakeries to bake with. So for
Nice.
me, it's not difficult to get white, sifted white spelt. I can buy
Mm-hmm.
that. So let's
Yeah.
say I would use 70% of that, and then I will mill my 30% of the whole spelt myself. So I will have a country loaf of spelt, 70 30
Mm-hmm.
percent But there's no rules.
Right.
It depends what people want. Some people want lighter bread, a heavy bread, 100% grains. So it depends what people want. So
Yeah, you got to cater to your needs and what's locally available to
yeah, to
you.
your needs, because there's no rules, because some people want 100% whole grains, some want 70 30, some 80 20. It's just like the
Mm-hmm.
60 40, so 50 50. So it's very
Mm-hmm.
different from what you want. Yeah, of course. Then the fermentation and the hydration, all this will affect. It will change. When you change
Definitely.
the ratio.
Do
So
you find that maybe it's not that dramatic of effect, but do you find that when you use different grains, they kind of have different yeast strains on them almost? Like different grains have different environmental introductions into your starter and they kind of have different effects on
oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
outcome of your starter. Do you see that a lot?
If I normally put a lot of, when I do a leaven, let's say I do a spelt leaven, okay? If I
Mm-hmm.
mill some of my fresh grains spelt and put it in, when you mill it, it has a lot of enzyme. The activities of the flour, it's fresh meal,
Mm-hmm.
it's warm. You put it in the leaven, you
Right.
mix it, and I think it will give you a very, very, very nice, fluffy and active leaven. So I think it's make a big difference by using a flour which has been on the shelf for 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, I don't know. So it will give
Gotcha.
a more character, it
Yeah.
will give more flavor. For me, it's very important to
Mhm.
create flavor, to create the flavor and the nutrition
Definitely.
part. I never,
Hmm.
I never, I never bake same day sourdough baking. So what's the use of
Hmm.
baking? I see a lot of people posting, same day sourdough baking. So what's the use of baking sourdough if you have to bake it the same day?
Right.
You don't understand why you're baking sourdough, because you're not
Hmm.
getting the benefits of the sourdough. First of all, we want this fermentation to go as slow as possible, so
Hmm.
that
And
when we bake
digest,
it,
yeah.
when we eat it, we feel very satisfied. We feel it's a bread with a lot of flavor, and then it's easy for us to digest it, because we don't need to
Hmm.
eat a lot of bread. So we just need
Right.
to eat just a little bread to get satisfied, So, but if you
Hmm.
go to buy the industrial bread, even you eat a whole loaf, and then you're hungry again after 1 hour, 1.5 hours.
Right.
So this is what people need to understand. It's so important to understand it. Why are we baking sourdough bread? Because we want the health benefit of it also, Of course, it's a
Hmm.
lot of flavor because the fermentation goes slowly, and then it's about the easy for us to digestion. It's only then,
Hmm.
actually there's been two studies. Well, actually one is done in USA, I don't know which university, and we have one in Sweden. It's been done. It said at the minimum hours of fermentation actually should be around 15 hours. Only then, you can digest
Yeah.
the bread, and your body can take all the minerals, the nutrients, the vitamins, and everything. Only the benefits.
Yeah. Absorb
That's
all the nutrients. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
So that's why,
Yeah, it's really nice.
sometimes when I travel, I will stay in the hotel, and then I will eat. I have to eat something, and then they will come with the rolls. They have made a rolls with a lot of yeast in it, and then really you feel
Hmm.
bad about it after after I've been eating sourdough bread for over 20 years, so it's very
Right.
difficult, to use the bread because the fermentation is not there. You see, I
Right.
also did it
Right.
35
It's
years
very
ago.
short.
Yeah, so the process. From start to finish.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's take to 1 hour, 1.5 hour because they put a lot of yeast
Yeah.
in it, and then imagine that bread's going to grow in your stomach. Because the
Hmm.
fermentation will with the water you have been drinking, and then will expand. Actually, it's not good. That's why people need to understand. Why it's so important to eat sourdough bread. First of all, you don't need to eat a lot of bread. It's give you
Hmm.
more flavor, and then you can get all the nutrition that your body needs. And it's
Right.
not a problem to eat bread. Bread is not a problem. People is avoiding bread. Why? Bread has been there
Yeah.
for thousands
Right.
of years in all the cultures.
Right.
So,
Right.
eh? so it's very important to understand this. So.
Yeah, it's definitely it's crazy to me to see the level that people avoid bread without really understanding what's in it. Like, people I saw an interview one time where someone was like running around like chasing people who wouldn't eat pasta, and they were like, "Well, why don't you eat pasta?" And they were like, "Oh, it's the wheat." And they're like, "Well, what about the wheat?" And no one really knew. Like, they're just blindly following these diets without really like understanding what is in bread to avoid, and if there's something to avoid. But I think you have a really good point that bread is more than just something that's filler. It's something that can be
Yeah,
incredibly nutrient dense and has been used for thousands of years to drive societies when they were starving. That's what they had was bread. And they made do what they had, and they use local grains like you do. So it's refreshing to hear that people are still focusing on those qualities of bread, and like what I think of bread as like a very strong driving force in helping
yeah,
us.
it's very important because it doesn't matter
Yeah.
which culture you go, you have bread everywhere. Either it's
Right.
flat bread, it's bread.
Exactly.
It's bread everywhere, and bread should not be
Mhm.
a luxurious thing. So bread should be affordable for everybody.
Right.
I'll
Absolutely.
tell
All
you one friend,
kinds. Yeah.
one story. I normally go to my friend in Greece and help them with a
Hmm.
bakery. He has a very huge production of bakery, and with 7 to 8 shops. And he
Hmm.
told me, for him was very important that everybody, even that person who cannot afford, because in his bakery he will have bread that will cost probably, I don't know, 5, 6 euro, €7 one bread, and other bread will
Hmm.
cost only €1 because
Right.
he will tell the people that can afford the bread to cover the
Hmm.
costs, so that the person who has no money can come to the shop and buy a bread that he can have also. So in this way, I think
Hmm.
it's really, really, really nice. So
Yeah,
that
definitely.
bread should be for everybody. So
Definitely.
everybody should be able to afford the bread.
Yeah, and good bread too, right?
Yeah,
Not the
yeah, bread.
commercial stuff
Yeah,
that we're
definitely it
seeing,
has
but
to be.
like
There's
good
difference between bread and
sourdough.
bread.
Right,
So,
right. Yeah. I definitely agree with you. So, I guess changing directions a little bit, I wanted to talk a little bit about equipment. I saw in a few of your videos on your Instagram, I think probably in a bakery setting, I saw some really nice ovens that I recognize that I've used in the past in like culinary school and stuff like that. And I wanted to hear your opinion and hear you talk a little bit about like commercial baking versus like home baking. And you talked earlier that all your master classes were based on home baking and not like commercial equipment. What is your thoughts and advice around like baking at home and making do with what you have? How do you translate what you know in the industry to what you're teaching everybody who's working from home?
yeah, so you see, there's two different things here. When you bake for profession in a professional way, you need those
Mhm.
equipment because first of all you need space, and then you need to bake a big quantity, and it has to
Mhm.
be practical for you. When because
Right.
time is money, okay? So you have to do a lot of production.
Yeah,
You
definitely.
have to do a lot of production in a very short time, so you need to have
Hmm.
space, you need to have, yeah, if you have to bake 1,000 bread a day, so different bread,
Hmm.
so you need space and oven and facilities. But at home, how many bread can we bake? Max maybe 5 6 bread at a time. Some oven, I don't know, in
Yeah.
the US I've seen home oven quite large, you can bake 2 or 3 breads. I don't know. It depends if you have a stone
Yeah.
or you're baking in a pot, in a
Right.
Dutch oven. So
Or Dutch oven. Yeah.
it's all depends what you have. But actually, I have proven it. Before I made this online course, I never baked at home. For years. I never
Hmm.
used my
Right.
oven at home because it was not a need for me. Because if I need a
Right.
bread, I'd take a bread from my work and I bring it home.
Hmm.
But after
Right.
I did this workshop, after we filmed this workshop, I got so inspired. So I try to bake at least once a week in my oven. I'll make a dough and
Nice.
bring it home, and I just want to because I see amazing result one can get. I see my students. We have this
Hmm.
special group, a private group from all my students that has bought the course on Facebook
Hmm.
where they can share the
Right.
knowledge because you see, I have almost 1,300 students. I cannot answer everybody. I get a lot of message on
Right.
Instagram and all this. So
Hmm. Oh, I'm
we try
sure.
to
Help
gather
each other.
everyone in one place.
Hmm.
Even I cannot answer all the questions, but some my other student which has been going through the
Hmm.
same problem, they will be able to answer. So actually, if you're going
Definitely.
to bake at home, it's not a problem. You can bake amazing bread at home
Hmm.
from whatever you have. You don't need fancy equipment. You don't need fancy. You don't. Just an example I'll give you. You can take a kitchen cloth and put 4 baguettes for proofing on a tray
Right.
and a kitchen
Hmm.
cloth. So it's so simple is
Right.
that with a plastic bag on top. Put it in
Yeah.
the fridge and
Absolutely.
then heat up your oven and you bake. But it's very important to have either you bake on a steel in your oven or
Hmm.
stone, or
Right.
you have the Dutch oven. So
Hmm.
whatever you can afford, you can buy a very cheap stone, or you can go to a place where they cut stone to get a granite. I had a granite a thick granite like this for so many years. So it's worked very
Hmm.
fine. It depends what people can afford. A very
Right.
expensive Dutch oven or Funo oven, or so one can make really good bread from whatever you have at home. You don't need a expensive Banneton. You can just take
Hmm.
a bowl, put a cloth in it, and put because you're making 2 breads.
Hmm.
Eh?
Right. Right.
So
Oh
this
yeah.
is this is
Absolutely.
this is how my course is built on. You use what you have at home.
Hmm.
So everybody
Yeah.
have the basic things, basic at home. So.
Yeah, and it's approachable for everyone at home too, which I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
is really important. I
yeah.
think
Of course,
that's the thing
if
that
people can afford, they can go and buy the fancy and expensive thing. But it's whatever you have.
it's not
Uh,
necessary. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is people see Instagrams and they see stuff like, like the Challenger bread pan, which is a pretty popular like Dutch oven style pan, and they think they need to spend $150-$200 on a Dutch oven when they don't need to. And so I think some people get discouraged because they see price tags on things that they think they need and they don't need it.
Yeah,
And so
no,
that's
one don't
encouraging
need,
to
one
hear.
don't need. Of course, it depends what. Probably you get a better result when you have a thick cast iron covered and all this. Will create a better result. But in the end, you're baking because you want to eat a good bread and give a good bread to your family. Then still you can do it from whatever you have at home. A stone,
Right.
even a
Still
tray will be fine. So this is what I will
definitely.
encourage people to do.
Yeah.
One can really
So
bake nice bread at home.
absolutely. I've definitely done it. Obviously, you've done it through your master class. So
Yeah,
for everyone listening, definitely achievable. Just keep at it, right? That's the biggest thing is
yeah.
just keep trying, keep doing, keep learning. What is the number one question you get about sourdough? Like, of all the questions, you said you had 13,000 students, you don't have time to answer them. Of all the questions, what do you think is either the number one question that you get asked or the number one most important question you get asked?
I think the most important question is how to make a starter.
Right. Got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think because I sometimes I put so a small video clip with my starters very active. It's a really really active starter. Doesn't matter wherever I go in the world. I always travel like for 200 grams, 300 grams. If I will stay 1 week in a bakery, when I leave this bakery, I bake 500 kilo of doughs and gone from there with this 300
Right.
gram ahead.
Of
Okay,
course.
so I think people when they see that, and of course I've been taking nicely care of it now for 20 or 21 years, and now I'm really happy to see the lab result of it. Exactly, you can go on my Instagram and read
Right.
about it. Okay,
Yeah, I saw it. It
so
was really cool.
yeah, so I'm really happy to get this lab test. Took almost 3 months to do. They have to do different procedure and all this. So I'm really happy to
Right.
get the result now, and I'm really happy that it is how you say saved for the future generation to come in the sourdough library in Belgium. So the first question, if people want to bake sourdough bread, one can go read a lot of books and watch a lot of YouTube. You can take a lot of courses. But if you don't have the main ingredients, the start which will make your dough rise and give you a good result, then nothing will help you. So first of
Right.
all, you need to make a good starter. So that's the first question. Mostly I'll get, and of course I'll get a lot of questions also. How to make holes in bread? How to make big holes in bread?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Not so good for sandwiches, but they look pretty.
yeah. It
Yeah.
depends. If
Definitely.
ciabatta is nice, if you. That's why
Oh,
it's very
yeah.
important to understand all the bread have different characters. Like I have my signature
Right.
bread, the big bread, which has very big holes in it. I call it pain au levain. Sourdough bread, or
Okay.
in French pain au levain. So this bread,
Right.
you can just break it and dip it in good olive oil and garlic or whatever, and just eat it,
And
or dip
delicious.
it in the
Yep.
soup and eat
Perfect.
it. So,
Oh,
so
yeah.
you understand, each bread have their own characters there. Because you have a heavy rye bread, and a dense bread. You have a whole wheat bread. Every bread have the way you have to know how to eat it. So.
Yeah, I think that's maybe like another misconception that people have about bread is all bread is going to come out as this big, nice, had this huge rise, had all these big holes in them. I think
No,
a
no,
lot
no.
of people perceive bread in general as that, and it's not necessarily that, right? We have our rye loaves, which are really dense.
Yeah,
We have
yeah,
stollen, which is like a whole nother world of sweetness, right? We have all of these different kind of breads, a pain au levain, which is just like really simple, classic, delicious, perfect. Ciabatta,
yeah.
Ciabatta is definitely one of my favorites. Focaccia is one of my favorites. Delicious as sourdoughs. So I definitely think like people, need to understand like the different styles and really what style they're looking for, right? Like there's traditional, old classic country style, and then you have your really holies and your really dense and all that. And understanding that and understanding how your flour is working on that too, because I think sometimes people see like a whole wheat or they see a spelt and they think it's going to look exactly the same as just like 100% like basic white flour, and so I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
understanding that difference is
So I think it's really
really
important to
important going into
understand.
bake.
Yeah, because
Definitely.
that's why I try to make a big varieties of bread. You see, I
Mm-hmm.
try to show people different breads from dense bread. Actually, one of my favorite. You had this question. What is my favorite bread? Actually, for me, is my favorite bread is a good dry bread. I have this bread I call
Okay.
it the Viking bread. You know,
Mm-hmm.
100% rye with a
Wow.
lot of ingredients, a lot of seeds in it, and sometimes we have
Mm-hmm.
cooked whole barley porridge in it also. So
Oh
it's a
wow.
very
Okay.
heavy bread, but this
Yeah.
bread can last you for 1 month in the fridge, and it still
Wow.
is so tasty. And you just need two small slices, like in the Nordic country here. So
Mm-hmm.
people without this kind of bread, they will not get satisfied, like the Danes, their
Right.
neighbors to Sweden, and if they don't get their rye bread every day, they're not going to get satisfied. You can give them a
Right.
lot of, but in France, but they need the baguettes every day. In
Right.
in Italy, they
Mm-hmm.
will need the ciabattas and the focaccias, the light bread. So
Mm-hmm.
I think every culture has their own ways of eating what is important for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people just need to try, and so that's why I'm so broad. I like to share. I
Mm-hmm.
know a lot of bread, so for me, so that's why I show it to people also. So that's why I try to
Mm-hmm.
show people a lot of different kinds of bread.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people need to understand different culture, different ways eating. Like in France, if the Frenchmen, they don't get the French people, they don't get the baguettes.
Mm-hmm.
Then probably their day is not completed, because you see the bakery in France, they're baking whole day. They don't bake it in the
Right.
morning and sell it whole day. The baguette is baked every
Right.
hour.
Gosh,
So
I
you see,
know.
it's a
Yeah.
culture.
Crazy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think that's a good place for people to start too, is to look at their culture, look at their
yeah,
family and their
yeah,
heritage. And
yeah,
I think in terms of types of bread in the world, it can be pretty daunting. There's a lot out there and there's a lot to learn, and I think you can attest to that and I can attest to that. Like we're forever learning. There's always different loaves and different styles to learn, but I think always just going back to your heritage is like a great way to start and like connect with your family in a way that maybe you haven't in the past. Is like
mm,
that's what I love about fermentation, and that's what I love about food in specific, is just like the connection it allows you to have to the people around you. And you know your favorite might be rye, but my favorite might not be rye, and that's okay.
yeah,
But there's a
yeah. We
million
all have
recipes
different
out
tastes.
there. Right, exactly. And learning how that fits you, and trying different recipes that fit your
Yeah,
needs and
yeah,
your wants, like you've been saying, I think is definitely really really cool about sourdough, almost in the sense that like it's a universal thing, but we can all make it our own at the same time. um, which is just, yeah, I don't know. I love that about it. So let's shift again for a second. I want to talk about wild yeast starters. So I've seen on your page, I've seen a few maybe like started off of apples or like different kinds of fruits or vegetables, like these wild yeast starters. What do you do with them? Do you use them as sourdough starters? Have you been successful with it? What made you think to do that? All of that kind of like, what can you tell us about like wild yeast and why you would use it, or why you might want to use it, benefits, flavors, all of that kind of thing.
yeah. So wild yeast, actually, we have yeast everywhere. In
Right.
all the fruits and all the vegetables. You
Yep.
can just ferment anything.
Oh
Actually,
yeah, just breathe.
yeah. Actually, I've been doing it for many years, for almost 18
Mm-hmm.
years. I used to bake, like I said, I will go through the season. In the autumn, you have a lot of apple. In the summer, you have grapes. And so
Mm-hmm.
to make a wild yeast, you just take one pot of fruits, can
Mhm.
be fresh fruit or dry fruits, and 4 parts of water, and sometimes a little honey or raw sugar.
Right.
So and let it ferment for up to 12 days. In a bottle. Let it ferment,
Mhm.
and then you use that water to make a leaven. So it's only
Okay.
one time using. It's only one time. It's not like sourdough.
Right.
You refresh it,
Or it's a
okay?
continuous. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then this will give you a bread, it will give you a nice bread, flavorful bread. It depends what fruit
Mhm.
you're using, because you have the honey and then you have the fruits. Sometimes you have some sugar, and also the dough will be more
Mhm.
sweeter. And then you get a very nice character of the bread. But the problem is here. The problem is here because we have done, when I was 2015, I was in Belgium. Actually, I have a
Mhm.
video on YouTube. If somebody will search on wild yeast, I was there in Belgium and explaining about the different wild yeast, because we
Mhm.
made a lot of different wild yeast with different fruits, and to see herb and dry fruits, to see what's the character. And some will have a nice fermentation, some will not have a nice fermentation because of the
Mhm.
acidity in the fruit. Like, if you
Okay.
have the
Yeah.
lemon, if you use,
Mhm.
let's say you use some tangerine or lemon or so the fermentation will not be there.
Right.
So it will break the structure, the gluten from the dough. But wild yeast is nice to make, but normally the water, you will keep it up for 2 months. It will last you for 2 months in the fridge.
Mhm.
But in the end, you have a flavorful bread and nice, but the benefit, I don't know. But one problem can be very dangerous with it. You can get a very bad bacteria coming into the wildest water.
Right. Yeah.
So this is
Always got to
what
be
this is
careful.
one disadvantage. If
Mhm.
probably it gets a cross contamination.
Mhm.
And of course, then in the end you don't have any benefits of it. It's just about the flavor, the structure. It will
Mhm.
not have the sourdough benefits. So I do it time to time, just to
Just for
try
fun.
something new, and to show people that
Mhm.
you can just use natural yeast to make your bread to bake, to rise. So
What are your thoughts on all of the different trends? So I've been seeing people make sourdough starter with all different types of things like yogurt, kombucha, fruit flies. I've seen an uptick in people trying to make starters with like fruit flies, which to me would be like a cross contamination concern, because it's pest bringing in bad
yeah,
bacteria.
yeah.
What do you like? Have you seen those trends? Have you seen other types of trends of like using other ferments to start a sourdough starter? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Have you ever tried it?
Yeah, I've tried different. The thing is, one thing here is very important to understand. Okay, the our mother starter, the starter that I
Hmm.
have always, I keep it clean all the time. Then, if I want to go to make a leaven, if I'm going to make a leaven, then I will use. If I'm going to make a leaven, I will use a, how you say. I can use yogurt or milk or
Hmm.
walnut or
Kombucha?
whatever,
Hmm.
kombucha, So, because you want to keep your mother starter clean, but
Hmm.
the leaven that you want the flavor to be in your bread, that you can make with different taste. So never make your original mother start to put other ingredients in it. Keep that clean, but
Hmm.
make different kinds of leaven with different ingredients. So
Yeah, that's
people
a
can
really good
experiment.
idea.
Yeah, people
Yeah.
can experiment and do whatever and see. So
Hmm.
I have made bread only with kombucha. Take the kombucha water and make a
Hmm.
leaven with it and bake. Very nice bread. I have made with water
Hmm.
kefir grains. Water kefir
Oh,
grains.
cool. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, take the water and then make a leaven, and then you make a bread with it.
Hmm.
So,
Right.
so probably you will not have the same benefit of the probiotic of the kombucha if you have ferment it and bake it. I don't know. I don't know. One
Hard
need
to
to
tell, right?
do.
The science isn't there
Yeah,
yet.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, that's really good advice to always keep your mother's starter clean and keep her happy and healthy. And then whatever you want to do outside of that, you should do
Yeah,
outside of
yeah,
that to make sure
yeah,
you always
yeah,
have a healthy, happy base. That's a really good
yeah.
idea. Huh. Okay. I think I'm about out of questions for you. Do you have any last words of advice, stories you want to tell, things you want to say, favorite loaves you want to share?
I think there's some advice, I get from people, a lot of my students, and so one really need to have patience, to baking sourdough bread. Give it time,
Definitely.
and let the fermentation take time. Some places it's all depends, from different places to places. If I go to Asia, it's very hot, there's very humidity, and the fermentation will go very fast. Like one story I can tell you, I was in Israel some years ago to do a workshop there, and then I remember it was almost 48 degrees Celsius, 48. you
Wow.
know
That's
so
hot.
so it was really hot, and
Yeah.
even we use almost ice and water, half ice, water, ice, pieces of ice, put water
Yeah.
in it and use it, and the dough, I tell you, the dough will double in 2 hours. But that is very
Right.
important. It's very important how much inoculation you're using in your dough. So that's why sourdough baking is very important to plan. It depends where you live and how much inoculation. Inoculation means how much starter you're going to have in your dough to make your dough for
Right.
fermenting. So one can use from 5%. Let's say you have 1 kilo flour, use 5 gram, 5 grams of starter. To if you live in a
Right.
very hot country. If you live in a cold countries, then probably use 30%. So in the
Right.
end, the same effect will. So you're controlling the fermentation in this way. So it's very important. Concentrate. Don't concentrate too much on recipes, because
Right.
it's good to have a formula, that you need to use 1 kilo flour, 700 gram water, 200 gram of starch, 2% of salt, 20 grams of salt, like this. To have it, but
Right.
in the end, it depends where you are. Your flour can react differently. Your flour can take more water or less water, or your fermentation can go faster or slower, or all this very matters. So that's why it's very important to try and experience. Your temperature is very important in your kitchen is very important. Your oven for the finished result. People ask why I don't get a ear on my bread. Probably your dough is not been scoring nicely, or your oven is not hot enough, or you don't have a
Right.
steam. You do not. All these things matters. So
Mm-hmm.
so one just need to try a couple of times
Yeah.
and
Keep
seeing
going.
where the mistake has been done. So
Yeah.
everybody can
I
do
think,
it. It's not difficult. Just have patience and practice and practice and practice.
and it's all going to taste good. Even the denser
Yeah,
loaves, they're
yeah.
still
In
going to
the end,
taste
it's
good,
about the
right? Like it
taste.
all
It's
tastes
about the
good.
flavor,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking us
oh, thank you so
today. We
much.
really
It was
appreciate
really
it.
nice, to share some of my
Good.
ideas. So people, if
Cool.
they want, they can check my website, beeshamthebaker.com, and see what is it. Check my Instagram. Don't forget,
All of it.
I'm a funny guy. I always put some funny stuff. Like yesterday. Yesterday we have the Fat Tuesday in Sweden. We eat this
Oh,
special
okay.
bakes. See, if you go on my Instagram, you will see we have a cardamom buns, a rich buns
Ooh.
with a almond cream, and then whipped cream on top with a hat on it. So I think people eat millions. All the bakery do really good business on it. So I made for the schools, made a couple of hundred yesterday.
Oh,
So
yeah.
so
They look
it
so
was really
good.
nice. So
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for talking to us.
yeah, thank you so much for having me, and it's a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed listening to all the wonderful knowledge Beesham had to offer, and remember to check out his Instagram. Thanks for joining us, and use the code CFH Podcast to get 25% off. and help you in your sourdough journey.